Okay, well, let me just start by saying that ECOS is really lucky to have somebody with Peter's background to finish putting our publication together. Peter Tobiessen is a professor emeritus at Union College, where he taught biology for, I think you said 45 years. He's been an ECOS member for about 30 years. I recently found out that Peter wrote a book titled The Secret Life of a Lake, The Ecology of Northern Lakes and Their Stewardship. So that book is available. I checked into it at either Amazon or at the Open Door. I'll be getting that. And it would especially be of interest for any of us that might be curious about what's really going on underneath our kayaks and canoes as we're paddling. So with that, I'm going to turn the talk over to Peter to talk about his findings out in Schoharie County. And Peter, I think I actually unmuted you. Let's see if we can unmute you. You see, there you go.
Yeah, okay. So now I share screen?
Yes, if you share screen.
Okay. Why, is that it?
That's it. And then, yep, perfect.
Whoa, okay. Thank you for coming, everybody. This is this is great. As you have heard, I recently finished the Natural Areas book for Schoharie County. We have natural areas books describing places in all the counties surrounding Schenectady, but they hadn't done Schoharie. So this is the one about Schoharie. And this is the beautiful Minekill Falls in Minekill Falls State Park. And it's really quite a lovely thing to see. Let's see if I can, okay. This is the table of contents. Unfortunately, notice that they all have page numbers. And if you've bought the book, you realize that the book doesn't have any page numbers. So we allow you, it's kind of like a participation event. We allow you, you are quite free to create your own page numbers. Each of the sections is done alphabetically, so you can figure that out too. But notice that this is different from most of our other guidebooks. Here are the things that are typical to the guidebooks. These are the actual site descriptions of the things that you would expect in our typical guidebook, showing trails and what kinds of features are available. But I noticed that there are only 13 of them. Some of the other books we have 30 of these things. So I figured that I had to do something else. And what I did is had a whole section here where I give a good background. I give a background of the history of Schoharie County, which is quite interesting with Revolutionary War battles and things like that. And it also helps to describe what the vegetation is all about. And then a section on the geology, a pretty good section there. And then forest ecology. How do you read a forest? When you go into a forest, how do you know what's going on there? And information in this section you can use in any of the woods that you tend to walk through, and you can use you can understand the forest a little bit better. And a section on how old is a tree. A lot of people wonder about that. There's a tree in the Schoharie Valley that has been dated at over 400 years. And some of the other ones might be close to that. And then various other things, the long path and the general overview maps. So let's look at a little bit further here. Oops. Why isn't my... Well, I'm not advancing here.
Let's see. What happens when you hit your right button on your screen? You know where the arrows are next to your numbers?
Yeah, that's what I've done. And your screen sharing sucks. Okay, what did that? I don't know what happened there, but oh, good, it's working now. This is the what they call the Old Stone Fort. It was built in 1772 during the war. A palisade during the Revolutionary War. A palisade was constructed around it, so it became a fort. So This now is a museum, and I urge you all to go to that museum. It's a small price to pay, but there's all sorts of artifacts in there from Schoharie Valley, as well as a cannonball that was lodged in the rafters of the church during the war, the Revolutionary War. And you can actually see the hole in the roof where the cannonball went. So that's definitely a must-see thing. Now, why is okay? And associated with that is a little park, and in the park is just a typical little nice thing that you see in the Schoharie Valley. This is obviously a covered bridge. It is very old, and you can't drive your car across it, but you can walk across it. And one of the important things about Schoharie Valley is its history. And it was very, very early. Obviously, the Native Americans were there early first, and the Europeans started moving in the 1700s. And in the book, there's actually a diagram, actually a picture of the original deed in 1710 for Mr. Vroman, who bought some land from the Indians. And in fact, there are 3 different clans of the natives that were in the valley that gave their, and each of the chief, there are 6 elders in each of those tribes, and you can see their thumbprints next to on that deed, which is sort of interesting, 1710. It was very, very well established as an agricultural area, and the people moved in, and you can see that by 1860, the population was 34,000. Now, most of the best land is down in the valley, as you'll see, and so as it became more and more crowded, the valley got saturated, and people moved up in the uplands. And most of the natural areas that you're going to see are in the uplands. Now, the farms were quite dense up there. There were communities as represented by existing cemeteries and things, so that by and then what happened was that the Erie Canal opened up, and railroads, and all of the farmers that were up in those uplands, which was really lousy soil, decided that they could go do better in Illinois and Wisconsin and places like that. So the population dropped 43% between 1860 and 1930. So 1860 was the maximum, 1930 was the recent minimum. And as you can see, it hasn't recovered, so that the current population is only 30,800, and it hasn't even gotten as high as it was back in 1860. So there was this massive exodus after 1860, and most of the agricultural lands up in the uplands there were abandoned. And so the plants came in, and plant succession has proceeded since that time. And most of the forests in the uplands are mid-successional forests. Oh. Now, this is just a general overview of the county. Here is the Route 88 going through, and Route 30 coming back down here. The Schoharie Valley essentially goes along Route 30. And you can hear Schoharie, and this is where the old stone fort is, and then Middleburg. And here is a place that one of my favorite places called Roman's Nose, and that's listed in the guide. And then you go down farther, and you see the wooden bridge. There's an old wooden bridge we talked about. Here's Minekill, where Minekill Falls is. And then there are various other things like that. So we're going to sort of take a tour through some of these places and just hit the high points, just to give you a general idea of what kind of possibilities are there. The first place, which should be on all of your lists to go, is Vroman's Nose. Mr. Vroman was one of the early settlers there, and his clan, they lived underneath this big this jutting nose coming out. There's the geological term of features that jut out into valleys, and they're called noses. And this one actually looks like a nose. So this is Vroman's Nose. Now, It's a short hike. It's a round trip of about 2 miles. And it goes up about 600 feet, but it's very mild, and it's quite beautiful when you get up there. When you look out toward the valley from Vroman's Nose, you see this incredible agricultural valley here. And then, so this was first settled, and then later on the settlers were forced to go up into these uplands here, which with the much more poorer agricultural conditions. So you see the valley, the river, this is a Schoharie Creek coming down here. And during the flood, the Irma flood, this was entirely flooded. Whoops, sorry about that. I don't, okay, let's do this. There we go, there. So this is the valley, and there's a place on the top of Vroman's Nose. There's a hard sandstone layer that was resistant to the glacier, and part of that has been denuded of vegetation, and that area is actually called the dancing floor. And this is the dance floor looking out over the valley. And at the dance floor, you can see all sorts of things. Sandstone, you can carve your name in sandstone, but the glacier, when it went by 30,000 years ago, there were stones beneath the glacier, and they scraped along this layer, this sandstone, flat sandstone layer. So what you see here are scrapes from boulders that the glacier came along. So these scrapes are 30,000 years old, and they tell you the direction that the glacier was going. And on Vroman's Nose, it actually was going east. It wasn't going south. And so these are called glacial striae, and you can see them on the top of Vroman's Nose. I urge everyone to make that hike. It's a beautiful hike with a beautiful view. Okay, now here's a nice mountain lake. Doesn't that look beautiful? Pristine woods around it. Well, it's not quite, but anyway, it happens to be Mallet Pond, and it happens to have been built. It's a fake lake. It was built with a dam back in 1976, and it was made by the Power Authority when they built the pump storage plant, which I'll talk about later. Everyone was saying, this is terrible, you screwed up the fisheries in Schoharie County. So they said, well, I will mitigate that by building a beautiful lake and stock it with trout. So you can get brook trout and rainbow trout in this lake. You have to, there's no motors. You can have to bring your kayak or canoe in about a 1/4 mile walk, but I can guarantee if you do that, you'll be the only person on that lake. It's beautiful. Now, typically, this is the kind of forest you see in the uplands. A lot of plantations and young to mid successional forest. You don't see great trees in most places. It's a mid successional forest, plantations, and quite frankly, not all that interesting. But this is a beautiful lake, Mallet Pond, and we urge you to go see that. This is another lake that was built from an old, it was dredged out. It used to be a mill pond back in the mid 1800s. And just recently in the 1990s, they dredged it out and made a fishing area here. And you can see the dam here. This is called Looking Glass Pond. Here's a fishing deck, and there's a picnic area around here. And there's also a nature trail, nice 2 mile nature trail, which goes around here. And you'll see all sorts of different vegetation types. And there's actually a little cemetery there, which Jones's Cemetery, and the oldest stone in that cemetery was 1810. So this is Looking Glass Pond, has all sorts of amenities, but it's also got nature trails, which are quite nice. Oops. Now, this is the best hike in the county, I think. This is called Donnie Hollow, and there's Donnie Holly Creek there. And along here is a path. This is the long path. You may know about the long path. It goes from the end of George Washington's Bridge and extends all the way up into the Adirondacks. And it has it has aqua blazes on it. So you can see the aqua blazes up there. And if you walk up here, it's about a 2-mile one way up to a road up here. But about a mile up this place, there are lots of ruins and of old mills and things like that. And up in the uplands there, you see remnants of this population, which must have been huge up there, but you don't see. All the houses and churches were made out of wood and they're all gone. So you see cemeteries, you see old mill structures and things like that, and successional forests, but you don't see houses. And it's always neat to sort of be in these areas, and you see the stone walls. Actually, there's a state forest up here called Burnt Russman, in which this area is located, and it's been estimated that 10,000 acre park has over 250 miles of stone walls in it. And you're walking along this incredible network of stone walls, and you could just imagine 150 years ago what it must have been like. But right now, it's all woods, and you just don't see any other sign of habitation besides the stone walls and the mills and the. Okay, whoops, here we go. Every now and then you find a big tree. This is in Ninekill State Park, and this is a white oak tree. It has a circumference of about 17 feet, which makes it somewhere between 5 and 6 feet in diameter. And there is Walt Hackey there leaning against it, holding it up with his fancy red jacket over. This tree, we don't really know how old it is. The old iconic tree in the Landis Arboretum, which was destroyed by Tropical Storm Irma, that was estimated at 400 years old. This is bigger. So we don't know whether it's 400 years old or whether it's less. But if it is 400 years old, that means it was a sapling when the Pilgrims came. Think about that. But anyway, this is a phenomenal tree. I personally love big trees, and I like to sort of sit next to them. But this happens to be about 10 meters away from a trail, the long path, with lots of people traveling on them. And if you do sit next to this tree and watch the hikers go by, they don't even notice it. They just walk right by it. Anyway, it's in Ninekill Park. The guide tells you how to get to it, and it's a phenomenal thing to sit next to this tree. And so another the indication of past populations up there are these cemeteries. This one, I think the oldest stones are at 1830 or 40, and most of the stones go up into the late 1800s. But this obviously had a pretty big church around it, but that church is nowhere to be seen, nor are any of the houses. It just is in the middle of the boondocks, and it's sort of fun to see things like that. And you can also see some structures. This happens to be a fire tower in Leonard Hill State Forest, I'm sorry. Believe it or not, this was put there in 1948, and it was decommissioned in 1988. Can you imagine that in 1988, they were still looking for forest fires with these fire towers? And there's another one in one of the other state parks, in the other state forests in Schoharie County, that they made into a communications tower. This one, they've taken the steps away of the first two series of steps, so you can't get up there unless you're willing to climb. I don't recommend it, but it would really be cool to be up there. Not recommended by ECOS, by the way. Don't do that. Don't do that. Whoops. And on the long path, there are these lean-tos, and one of the problems with the state forests up on those uplands is they don't have really good trails. And some of the trails are sort of lead you a little bit and then they sort of disappear in the woods. And it's pretty wild country up there. And you can get lost up there, and cell phone reception isn't great. So most of the park, most of the natural areas that I discuss in the guide have the long path going through it because it's such a well maintained and marked trail with those beautiful bright aqua blazes. But this is a lean-to. There's another one in one of the other state parks. Now, this is a 4-story barn. Here's the lower one. Okay, and they dug out down here. So this whole area is for the cattle. This is the next one, probably for chickens and things like that. This is the next one. And this is the top one where they bring in, see the ramp here? They bring in the hay from the fields and put it into storage places up here and then just drop it down to the various animals lower down here. Now, the reason and now the interesting thing about this barn is that a road goes through it. This is a maintained road. Well, maintained up to here. Further on, it's not well maintained, but it was obviously in 1900 when this barn was built. In 1900, there was a road that went right through it. And the reason that the road went through it is that they wanted to be able to get with their hay wagons up into the 4th story of this thing. So this is a hill. It's built on this big hill, and they are able with this a ramp that's not too steep to get the hay up there. And the road just happened to be an inconvenience in there, and so they just built the barn right around the road. It was built in 1900s, and recently the current owner has refurbished it, and it's quite beautiful. Okay, there's another construction. This is the Blenheim Bridge, and it was 210 feet long. It's the longest wooden bridge in the country. There's another one in California which says it is, but it's arguable, and we of course think that ours is wider, that ours is bigger. So this is a span of 200 feet. And the original bridge, this is a replica. The original bridge was 15 feet lower than this, and Hurricane Irma, or Tropical Storm Irma, wiped it out. There's a metal bridge where I took this picture from, and that bridge was lifted right off. The original bridge was lifted right off of its abutments, and it came downstream here and crashed into this big steel bridge and totally splintered it up. There was hardly anything left of it. But if you go inside, it's now a bridge to nowhere. But if you go inside, you see that the replication is just as the old one was built. It was built from plans that were discovered that had been written up in 1930s during the Depression, and so that this is built on those old plans. So this is a direct replica of that. But it was built it was finished just, I think, in 2007 or something like that. There's actually a NOVA program about the building of this bridge. But if you look very carefully, there's an arch. See the arch that goes in here and down here. And that arch is a main component of its support. Whoops. And here's a picture on the inside of that arch. And the original bridge was built in 1854. Think of these guys in 1854 building this bridge over a river as the river was flowing. Just incredible to think that. And this is very ingenious because they have, these are 6x6s or 6x8, maybe 8x8s, I'm not sure. But no, and this is the arch. In order to make this arch strong, they have these little chunks. Whoops, sorry about that. These little chinks in here that keep these things oriented so that they won't slide against each other. And of course, they didn't have glue, or they couldn't laminate these things back in 1850. So this this maintains the integrity of the arch, so these don't slip back and forth, and it makes it 3 times stronger than just a single one of these things. So the joinery in this structure is phenomenal. If you happen to be a wood worker, you would love to see it. Now this looks like a bunch of rocks, but they are fossilized root stumps of plants back 380 million years ago. So these are stumps of plants before flowering plants and even before seed plants were evolved. It took another 10 or 20 years before seed plants evolved, and 150 million years before flowering plants were formed. This is 120 years before the first dinosaur. And these plants were 30 or 40 feet tall, but they are related to horsetails and lycopodium, the ground pine, and equisetum, the scouring rush, and ferns. These are also related to ferns. So these can't produce seeds. They haven't evolved seeds yet. So they evolve spores. Now, these are indication of a pretty big forest. They think it was a coastal forest, and because these things only had spores, they didn't have seeds. This had to be in a tropical area. So these were growing in a tropical area. Now, in case you hadn't noticed, Schoharie County is not tropical, but because of the shifting of the continental plates in the country, in the world at that time, 380 million years ago, Schoharie County was 700 miles south of the equator. So this is a tropical forest of 380 million years old. Now, the stratigraphy, the rocks in Schoharie County are mainly shales, and shales are sedimentary. And if you're lucky, you can find some shales that have fossils in. Now, these are brachiopods. Someone, when last time I talked about this, wondered whether this was 380 million years old, but it's not. These are brachiopods that only lived back between 450 and 350 million years ago. So you can find a stone like this with these fossils in it, and we tell you where we found this. So you too can come back from Schoharie County with a fossil, which I think is sort of cool. Now, this is another feature, a more modern feature built about in 1970s in Schoharie Valley. And this is what they call a pump storage plant. And if you were interested, if you read the New York Times earlier this week, there was a big article on pump storage plants all over the world. They're becoming very, very popular because they can store energy. So it's like a big, gigantic battery. And the principle is that down here, there are 4 large turbines. Now, a turbine, everybody knows if you spin a turbine around, it produces electricity. But what people don't know is that if you put electricity into a turbine, it turns a generator, and it can be used as a pump. So if there's a lot more electricity on the grid than is being used, you use that electricity to pump water from this reservoir, which is right next to Minekill State Park, up to a pond that's up here that in volume is much, in area is much larger than the lake down here. So it pumps water up there, and then in areas where the grid requires more energy that's being produced by the wind power or solar energy or something like that, you can let the water out of this reservoir here down through the turbines, and it generates electricity. So these kinds of pump storage programs are very, very valuable when we start talking about renewable energy sources that are intermittent, like solar and wind. So this is an early one, 17, I'm sorry, right, 1970. And now there are being proliferated and they're all over the world. There's this New York Times article had a map and they're building these things like mad. Okay, so this is a more modern thing. It's ecologically relevant. And at the end, whoops, no, not yet. Anyway, I pushed the wrong button. I also, since I'm trying to make this be an educational book where you can learn a lot of things, I also have a key to the common plants, the common trees that are going to be there. I don't spend much time on flowers. They're transient. You can spend a lot of time looking for them and they don't happen to be there, but the trees are not transient. They don't even run away from you. They're always going to be there, and you can always use this to find out what kind of trees are around, which tells you a lot about, obviously, the forest. And oops, there we go. How about that? So any questions? What, do I have to do anything?
Let's see, how about if you stop your screen share and we'll go back to people, and how about if, do you see an end screen share? Let's see.
Stop share. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, good.
Okay, and everybody can unmute themselves as they have questions. Let's see, while people are waiting to speak up or raise hand, I have one. That huge barn you showed, 4 stories, and it looks so well kept up right now. What is its current use? Is it used for livestock at this time?
I doubt it. I'm not sure. I don't know. Yeah, it's privately owned, and so you can't walk the road through the barn because you're on private property now. But in 1900, that was a major road going up the hill there.
Incredible.
And I don't know what he does with it. He probably keeps his Lamborghinis in there or something like that. I mean, if he has enough money,
that would be quite a mansion.
If he has enough money to refurbish that barn and make it so beautiful, he probably has at least a Porsche.
So while people are thinking of their questions too, let me just mention that this publication is available on the ECOS website. You can pay with PayPal. It's also available at the Open Door, and we're currently touching base with a few other places that we hope are going to start selling our publications as well.
So no questions.
Seriously?
Answered all their questions, I guess.
Maybe they don't know how to unmute themselves. Holly, you always have a question. Go for it.
I don't have a question, but Peter, I love your enthusiasm for this, and I can't wait to read the book. You've done a different thing here than has happened with the other books, and it sounds fascinating. And I think you had a very good time going out and doing this.
Yeah, I did. Now, I should mention that this project was started in 1998 by a group of very dedicated ECOS women. And they did a lot of work on it. And then it just sort of they just sort of dropped it for whatever reason. We've revised it, brought it back to life. So I'm standing on their shoulders. They did a lot of the work, and I just clarified it and added a little bit more.
It's also largely grant funded, right, Peter?
I'm sorry?
It was also largely grant funded too, wasn't it, Peter?
It was. The project was started by them, and then it sort of fizzled out. And then during the, well, let's see, I forget exactly the date, the early 2000s, the pipeline company that decided that they were going to invest in the Schoharie Valley. It could have been after that pipeline leak and an explosion in Blenheim. I'm not quite sure about that. But anyway, they had a request for proposals, which ECOS put in, and we got a grant to finish it. And then it went on to on the Onit for a couple of years, and then we finally got it away from them, and we finished it off.
So as far as exploring some of these areas, like when you're talking about Looking Glass Pond and Mallet Pond, even the Wooden Bridge, whose property is this? Are those state owned or?
Mostly, these are all state owned, well, well, the bridge, of course, it probably is partly county owned because there's a little park next to the big wooden bridge. Of course, Mindkill State Park, that's a state park that has the falls and the big tree in it. The others are state forests. And of course, the state got that land when the agricultural land was abandoned. No one was paying taxes on it, so it reverted to the state. So they bought it, they took it over and planted a lot of plantations and an awful lot of various kinds of pines, as well as Norway spruce. And a lot of those plantations are currently being harvested. So they're plantations, you can find plantations in various stages of harvesting and regrowth.
How long does it take to get out to some of those parks, to like the Mineville Park?
It takes about 35 minutes to get to Middleburg, and Middleburg is where well, yeah, Middleburg is just down about 10 miles from Schoharie, the town of Schoharie. And it takes about 35 minutes to get to Middleburg, and all the directions of how to get the places start at the traffic light in Middleburg. I think that may be the only traffic light in Schoharie County. I'm not sure. But yeah, so, you know, to get all the way down to Mindkill, that's another 30 miles. So you can do it in an hour.
Yeah, thank you.
But the thing, I would, if you're going to spend a day out there, I think you should absolutely go to Mindkill State Forest, which is down there, and also to Vroman's Nose. That's the place that you should, it should be top on your list. That's beautiful and it's easy to get up. And once you get up there, it's interesting geologically and biologically and has a beautiful view.
Great.
And that great ice cream shop at the trailhead too.
Yeah. Okay.
Wait, what was the name of that?
The
What
ice
was-
cream shop?
Yeah,
Ask you, Josh.
Yeah, I don't know. It's at the trailhead of Roman's Nose. Like, I don't remember what it's called, but
okay.
The Apple Barn is a really neat place to have lunch there, if you've ever been there. And I hope the Apple Barn will cover this, carry this book. And right next to the Apple Barn is a very moving memorial to the 20 people that died in that limousine accident, which is now being tried. It's a very, very moving and memorable memorial to those people, right next to the Apple Barn.
Peter, I'd like to know if the book includes Howe Caverns as a natural area, even though it is a very commercial kind of operation. There's certainly a lot of history with that family and the Sagendorf family, and how the visitation and tours and the property have been managed for several generations.
Which property was this?
Howe Cave or Howe's
Howe
Howe's
Cavern.
Cavern.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned that and give the information of how to, the website and things like that. But no, I didn't mention that as a natural area. Now, another area that I didn't mention in this talk is Landis Arboretum. If you've ever been to Landis, that's really a beautiful place too. And that has one of the few of the real old growth forests in the valley.
Great.
Could you address how you count the age of trees or estimate the age of trees?
Yeah. The best way to do it, well, you could just cut them down, right, and count the rings. And you can do that. It's sort of fun to do that in these these harvested plantations, you can go up and count, see how old the trees were when they died. The best way to do it is to take cores of the trees, and then you actually count the annual rings. This chapter on how do you age a tree, or how old is a tree, it describes that in detail. There was the bristlecone pines in California are the oldest that we know, somewhere almost around 5,000 years. And there was a situation where they cut one of these trees down with the permission from the Forest Service. And when they counted the rings, it was older than the known living bristlecone pine. So they had just murdered a tree that was older than the oldest established bristlecone pine. So that was embarrassing.
The problem with the increment borers are, I've only seen them come like that long. So I was looking at that, what, 6-7 foot diameter white oak, and wondering how in the world you could ever drill a core into that. But
well, you do. You can do it. They have bigger machines. And of course, the hard thing is to get to the center of the tree. If you miss the center of the tree, you've missed, who knows, 100 years worth of growth. I don't know. So, and then when you get into the bristlecone pine, most of the trunk is dead. So it's very, very hard to do that with, you know, taking many different cores and overlapping the cores, and make, that's how they do it. And the oldest established bristlecone is something like 4,860 years, 4,860 years. So.
amazing. What were the mills that were?
Well, they were grist mills and sawmills.
Okay. Any other questions out there? Oh, I see one comment in chat that the Landis Arboretum is covered in the book on page 37.
Yeah.
Excellent.
How much of the long path did you walk, Peter?
Not enough. But I really featured the long path because that's a path you're not going to get lost on. It's so well maintained and marked whereas in other parts of those upland state forests, it would be very easy to get lost on some of those trails. And I didn't want to be in the business of losing ECOS members to the, and you know, I saw a bear when I was messing around up there. So it's good to stay on established trails. The long path is 380 miles long or something crazy like that.
Yeah, I'm curious how much is when you go farther east, north, like around Thatcher, a lot of it's on road. I wonder how much is on road in Schoharie County.
Not, you know, less than 5% probably.
Okay, that's good.
There's a lot of
hard on the knees and around Thatcher. No, it's hard on the knees on the road parts.
Oh yeah. Well, some of the, if you, the long path goes straight up the south side of Roman's Nose, that's really, it's on a talent slope. So
yeah, so I've seen that go off to yeah.
But I don't urge you to go up there. The northern paths are much easier.
Any other questions? Well, Peter, that was really great, very inspiring. And, you know, Schoharie County is not very far away. So this definitely.
But it's so out of the way. It's out of the way. And I drove through it for 20 years going down fishing down south. And I didn't give it a second thought. And it's very cool. It's very cool. And then also those other things, you know, the added features, as I say, it's natural areas and other attractions. Those other attractions are cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that great overview. And let me just tell everybody real quick, our next event is on Sunday out on Ed Kautz's porch. It's a porch and pollinator event to talk a little bit about native gardens, pollinators, and what we might do different with lawns in the area. So with rain or shine, 1 o'clock, everybody's invited. And this is our last speaker series for the season, because in the summer, everybody's out playing when it's 7 o'clock and still light outside. So we're gonna let them do that, and we'll reconvene with this series probably in October, 3rd Thursday of the month.
Sarah, I'd like to thank you for doing this series. I think it's really,
Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you. We really had great speakers. And just like Peter, they keep refusing their speaker fee even, so that's even more generous.
Wonderful.
All right, well, hope everybody has a good night, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks.